What follows for the inaugural episode of the Hard Part podcast is a conversation with a 9-year PGA Tour player. He shared the course record at the Players' Championship, equal to the record set by Fred Couples and Greg Norman. He finished second place behind Bill Haas at the AT&T National and finished second again in 2016 at the Wells Fargo Championship. He was a four-time All-American at Georgia Tech, recipient of the NCAA Top 8 Award, and is currently the host of the Course Record podcast. I'm Jason Hodges, and here I bring you an in-depth, insightful, and intriguing conversation with Roberto Castro.
All right, going live in 5, 4, 3, 2. Wait, you don't say 2. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you, Jason.
We'll have to try our best not to act like we're on camera because this is already feeling kind of staged. I'm talking to Roberto Castro as I just introduced him in a video by myself that he didn't actually see, but all nice things you've said about it.
Really?
I don't think I have any negative things to say about you. Maybe we need to get to know each other better. Well, thanks for coming on, man. The whole nexus, as you know, behind this was go over the good parts of your career, your journey as a tour player,
Okay.
or whatever you're trying to create, actually. Tour player's career is a creation of his own making or her own making. But, of course, if you wanted to talk about another thing that you've created that at some point got kind of difficult or complicated, we can talk about that too.
Okay.
I've got about half of my coffee left, and you're at the end.
I was so nervous about this that I just chugged the entire
Well,
thing.
hopefully you're not going to crash.
I'll just be
during the
drinking
episode.
out of an
If
empty
you
cup.
crash, maybe it'll start to be less caffeinated and more darker. I don't know.
I'll be drinking out
Anyway,
of an
man,
empty.
I don't think we've actually ever talked about this, but like your career on tour was 9 years. Can you take me through like maybe how it progressed and how it digressed and picked back up again?
Sure. I think the premise of the conversation, as far as I understand it, you'd have to include the time before I got on the PGA Tour. So 3 years on the mini tours, year-ish on the what's now the Korn Ferry Tour. So I kind of look at it as a 13, 14-year journey.
Cool. What sticks out for you as perhaps a part where you felt like you were going backwards but then you actually later maybe took one step back to take two forward?
Two things. One, really, I just remember I was playing great on the mini tours. I won, 5, 6, 7 tournaments. One summer, I won like 2 of these. They had these big money tournaments. And I think I won 2 of them, and Kiz won at least 1 or 2. And I'd made like $200,000 playing mini tours. And I went to first stage and shot 74, 74, 74, 74 after shooting 66 for an entire 8 months. And that was probably the low point or the hardest part, like driving home from, I think it was in St. Augustine. Just like, what is the point of this? There's like I am no closer to where I want to be than where I was 12 months ago. And the next time I can get there is 12 months from now, because that's how Q School works. So it was just such a bummer, like feeling like I'd had my best year ever, had all this success, but had what felt like nothing to show for it.
Yeah. That was clearly in that 3-year period before you got onto a PGA Tour sanctioned tour.
I think I have the story right, but I think I came home, was depressed for 5 days or something, and then got over it. And I think that winter I went with 2 buddies to Serbia. We went to Prague. We went to Germany for like a 10-day trip. And then life was good. Like I was single, I'd made some money, took a great trip, and then came home, made a plan to try to play mini tours until Monday qualifiers started. Just put some cash in the bank. I think I won a tournament, and then I Monday qualified that summer onto the Korn Ferry Tour. So actually about 8 months later, after that hard part, I was on the Korn Ferry Tour and kind of on my way. So never made it through Q School. Actually, Monday qualified my way to that next level.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that.
Yeah.
Which
isn't that unusual, actually.
Yeah.
Like Spieth didn't make it through Q School. And we've had similar careers since then. So
you have.
yeah,
I would say like the same trajectory, just different color hair.
Yeah, just 3 less zeros on my bank.
Well, that's pretty juicy there. So there was like a 9-month period in there where you felt like you had what it took to play on the net. You probably always felt like you had what it took to play at the next level, but you had this seeming setback by not making Q school after beating the shit out of whoever on mini tours. So where in there did it get complex, or where in there did you do anything that might illustrate some kind of lack of faith or lack of understanding that you were gonna break through at the next point? Was there any moment in there?
Really, I did this again later, lost my card a couple times on tour, was really just like taking inventory of where I am today, what I have going for me, and that the past doesn't really matter. So at that point, I was 24 or something.
Yeah.
I had some money in the bank, had good friends, good family, like had a lot of things going for me. My game was incredible.
Yeah.
So if somebody was like, hey, will you take that hand of cards? You'd say, sure.
Yeah.
Like next year I can go play well in the mini tours, get through. So that's kind of how I looked at it. And then later on when I was on tour, I kind of looked at it the same way. It was like, wow, this is not where I want to be. But at the end of the day, I have conditional status. I have a good coach. I have, support, or wherever I was at that moment is like, wow, the last 6 months have sucked, but a lot of people would take where I am today and the opportunities that I have. So that was kind of one strategy.
Great. It was like you got back to your baseline of what you knew was there.
That's right.
And then you were like, I can still build on this.
Yeah.
Where in there though was it? How long did that take you? I mean, you didn't walk off the 18th or the 72nd hole of Q school and say, oh, well, I'm still here. I'm good. I can build. Where, somewhere on that Europe trip, maybe, did you get a sense, come back to life? Or
I fell over like a tree trunk and almost landed on a curb in that Europe trip. So I could have died in the streets of Belgrade and didn't. So that gave me some perspective on New Year's Eve morning. No, that's a good question. I think it really was like a week of kind of wandering around, because you have this plan of like, okay, so Q school starts in September. It goes through the first week of December. So it's a 3-month process. I've got this plan. My vision is to do that. And then it ended. That's really the worst part, is that if you flunk out a first stage, that was probably mid-September, and mini tours didn't start again. Even mini tours didn't start again until February. So you're looking at the balance of September, October, November, December. I was 5 months from a tournament.
yeah,
I went on the Atlanta schools website to look at substitute teaching, just to do something.
yeah,
5 months is a long time.
yeah.
So that really was the biggest bummer.
I've got some notes here. You can see down there that I've got some notes, but do you have anybody that you remember from that time period that helped you?
Really, my coach at the time, Jeff Patton, who was a big mentor, I think he gave me some time, but then he helped me develop the plan to move forward, which was, hey, mini tours, January, February, March, bank as much cash as you can, was his theory, and then go Monday every week. Because the previous year I had Mondayed a few times and had some success. I'm pretty sure I finished in the top 25 the last 2 tournaments of the web.com before Q school, because I Mondayed in and was playing. I was well at that level, but if you don't get, so I think Jeff was, helpful in that strategy, which was good strategy. I don't really remember what I did in October, November, December, but something.
I was probably at some point in there. I probably saw you, right?
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, it goes without mentioning on this live platform what kind of stuff we got into in our 20s. It's not necessary here.
I was going to say that was the New Year's we were together in New York, but it wasn't, because I think it was.
You went to Belgrade.
I think we were on the Euro trip.
Which is pretty damn cool too. Was there anything in there in that time where you felt like you changed your perspective or your beliefs about something that you kind of held dear?
No, I think that though was something I learned was like the lag effect. I think it applies to every business and everything that you try to do. Is there's such a huge lag between effort and results. Not even effort, actually like skill set in the market and then results. I think that happens on tour a ton, where a guy is doing the right things and playing great, but you don't see it for 12 months later. And the flip side, you can be doing the wrong things and be skating on like your past efforts for about 12 months too. I remember when I had some bad golf that like a third of the way through the season, I'd like peel off a 20th or 10th and I'd be like in decent shape, but like the cracks in the foundation were there. So I think that applies to everything. Like you can have the skills, have the marketability, but it's not going to show up for a long time. Sales process is probably the same way. People that are in sales, you can be killing it for months and months, but you don't really harvest all your efforts for quite a while.
I'm bound to respond to that by acknowledging the importance of really being engaged in what that preparation process is before the lag, before the lag period. But what's your takeaway there? Like, I know you just said it, but what do you tell somebody about being encouraged, or what do you tell your former self about being encouraged to stick it out there?
I think you just have to trust that what you're doing is the right thing. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
It really is. That's the hardest part, is long-term perspective, I think, is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It takes 5 years to get any business going. It takes, there's 10 people in the world that golf is for freak shows.
Yeah.
But most guys, it takes 5 years to get to where your peak is going to be. So that's all relative. Like, I don't know exactly. I'm not a close baseball follower, but Freddie Freeman got it on the Braves when he was like 19 or 20 years old. But when did he win MVP? It took him about 5 years. Or Matt Ryan didn't win MVP till that kind of the middle of his career, even though he got drafted top 5. Yeah. So, it takes time for all the pieces, it takes time for results to show up.
Like a podcast.
Like a podcast. No, it really is. Yeah. It's compound. People underestimate the value of compounding. And people like to talk about it in investments. It's huge in relationships too. That's not my original concept. I read that somewhere. Like, don't underestimate the value of compounding in relationships. Everyone knows that if you put a little bit away over a long time, you'll have a bunch of money at the end. But that's true with building a skill set, a job, a relationship. Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world.
That's a great takeaway there. So how do you think you know when you're on the right track? I have certainly, being 38 and being in the position I'm in, certainly gone down some rabbit holes in the past. I moved to fucking China for 6 months, and the value of that is yet to be totally harvested, I'm sure. But at some point, if you're doing something, and golf's probably different, but like, how do you know when what you're doing is going to have that compounding effect? How do you know when it doesn't?
That's a good question. I think it's probably choosing the right thing and taking time to choose the right path at the beginning.
Yeah.
That Sam Altman guy says that people don't spend enough time choosing what to work on.
Yeah.
So let's say you're just going to work 8 hours in a day. His advice is that you should spend an hour, let's say, or 2 hours at the beginning of the day thinking about what would be the most valuable thing to work on, rather than just starting to work on something. So if you expand that out to like a 5-year time horizon, you should really spend 6 months or a year thinking about, what am I going to do long-term over 5 years or 10 years, as opposed to just jumping into something. So I think that's one way to do it. And you may be right and you may be wrong, but taking that time, if you have it, if you have the luxury of taking that time, can be really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sometimes you wait so long to put that first effort in. It's like, it makes it harder to go back and do it from the beginning again.
Yeah.
Because you might be wrapped up in something else that's moderately successful, that might pay money, but you got to start over if you're going to get it right, like you say. Sometimes,
Yeah, and
that's hard.
The flip side of that process I just described is just sitting around waiting forever.
Yeah.
You say, I'm going to take 6 months and really figure out what I want to do.
Yeah.
Well, at the 6 month mark, you can hypothesize for 6 months about what the right problem to tackle is.
Yeah.
But if you don't tackle one eventually, you're just a guy sitting at a coffee shop talking about ideas.
Yeah, right.
Which is what we're doing right now.
Yeah. But we're recording it.
That's right. No, this is a perfect example. We had 2, 3, 4 conversations about what this might look like.
Yeah.
That's really taking the time to chart a long-term path. And if you do a few, you can see some compounding growth. But eventually we had to do this one.
Yeah.
Like, let's just do it and see how it goes. Could be terrible, could be great.
I'm enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it too. Yeah.
It sounds like you've covered almost all of the digging in here on this. You stick with it, have faith in knowing that what you're doing is right. Or think about it. Think about what you're devoting your time to. Let's pretend that golf didn't have the ROI that it does have in today's business world. I mean, let's face it.
Right.
If you're a good golfer in today's business world, it is the equivalent of being a mid-20s perfect 10 at a singles bar. Like, you don't have to do anything. You just go play golf.
What was that like for you to be a mid-20s?
It was tough. I just, could barely hold on to the job. Or I could barely finish law school because that was what I was doing. I was definitely on the other side and lost more than I won, for sure.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly. So, but let's pretend that it didn't have the direct effect. It didn't have, I'm going to keep working on this. My scores are going to get lower. Therefore, I'm going to get into better tournaments. Therefore, I'm going to make more money. There might be some cross-functional takeaways that pay off. And I guess that's what you're saying too. Like, have you seen how sticking with it, continue on, valuing compounding interest or compounding effort has paid off in another part of your life? Let's say it didn't pay off in your golf career.
Well, I think, are you asking, golf gives you the feedback is very direct.
Yeah.
There's a score on the board. You can look up earnings on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, nobody has to ask me like how I feel about my career doesn't matter. You can look up the numbers. Most professions are not like that. You could be the best lawyer at your firm for 10 years before you get recognized, or vice versa. So is that kind of what you're saying? Because I could see that.
Sure.
Yeah.
How much has it paid off in your life outside of golf? Or in what way?
I think it teaches you. I'm just kind of applying that playbook to the next phase of my career.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I already kind of see the lag effect working. Like, I've been working on stuff for a while now, and it's even our podcast, Course Record Show. It grows 20% episode over episode. And you look at the first few numbers and you're like, my God, we're putting a lot of time into this and nothing's happening. But it's growing. It's just like a network effect of one person tells another person. So that's one example where I've applied it. But again, nobody gets to see, like in golf, how that's going or not.
Yeah.
There's a dark side and a light side to the public nature of, like, if you're a business guy and you have a bad meeting or a bad quarter, that's not published in the, everyone at the pool at your country club or at your neighborhood pool doesn't be like, hey, like, sales were terrible for widgets last week, huh? Like, you'll get them next time. Nobody says that to you. Now,
the upside's lower. It's like the downside. That's the price you pay to have the bigger upside, I guess.
Yeah. And it's not like those conversations bother me, but at all. They never did. But it's unique. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
And I'm the one doing it, so I have control. People don't think about their families, or, if you're married to a professional athlete, you have no control over the results.
Yeah.
But yet, if you're Freddie Freeman's wife and he goes 0 for 60, she can't do anything about that. But she knows that everyone in the world knows that he's having the worst year of his career. So
yeah,
it's harder to not have control.
Yeah, that might explain why it's harder to watch golf than it is to play sometimes.
100%. That's why college golf coaches, they have to do that times 5. It's brutal.
That is,
and that's why successful caddies, I think, have very tight B personalities. They're very go with the flow. they are not control freaks, because your entire livelihood is dependent on something. Sure, you're going to try to do a great job and help your player, but you have no control over how that player does.
Maybe it saves a quarter of a shot every 4 rounds or something.
Oh, caddies can really help, but
yeah.
at the end of the day, the caddy can do all the right things. And if his player has a bad wrist or has problems at home or just plays bad because golf is hard, what are they going to do about that? You have to really be able to like ride the ups and downs as a caddy, more than a player even.
Really interesting perspective. Really good way to articulate what a lot of people probably realize, but can't put into words.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
Yeah. Do you have a quote or a maxim that you could trace back to the time that we've talked about that helped you, or a story?
Really, my coach Jeff, he was watching some movie, or maybe this was some like YouTube clip that someone tried to encapsulate this, where the guy's like driving down the road and he's like on a desert highway in a convertible, and whether he's leaving his old wife behind. I don't remember what the story was, but he sent me the clip, or he told me about it, and I think about it somewhere. The guy just reached up, grabbed the rearview mirror, ripped it off the car, and just threw it out the window. And that to me is helpful. You can't get rid of the things that have happened in the past, but you can't do shit about them either.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty damn good. And I'm going to try and find that video now.
yeah,
leave it in the description or show notes or whatever goes below this.
Yeah, I think it's some movie. Like online. I'm picturing some 70s, like big Cutlass type car. So I don't know where he found it.
With an imposing rearview mirror. Right?
Yes, exactly. Not like the one now that has like a computer in it. Like we're talking like chrome rimmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have to take probably a baton or maybe a pistol and shoot the camera on your display to get rid of that now.
Yeah. It's like,
which I don't advise.
No.
Well, great. Do you have, if you could encapsulate, actually, I want to ask this. Did you get any really bad advice at that time? Probably from the people at the pool.
That's a good question. I think advice, I've been fortunate to know a lot of successful people that have taken the time to try to help me and have helped me a ton. I think the dangerous thing with advice, including any advice I would give to somebody, so I try to preface it with, it's so biased by your own personal experience.
Yeah.
It's just impossible not to give someone advice that loosely mirrors your experience or what you did to be successful. And it could be good advice or it could be bad advice. So some things are kind of universal, but a lot of them are really specific to that person and may have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I like that Scott Galloway quote that he says, where he says, anyone who tells you to follow your passion is already rich. And it's so true. And there's some truth to that, and it's good advice, but it's so true. He says, find what you're good at. Follow what you're great at, not your passion. There's difference between a hobby and a job. And I try to think about that. I think he's right.
Yeah.
It's easy for Steve Jobs to say, follow your passion.
Yeah. Yeah. If your passion is playing the spoons on a cabinet, there's just not a market for that that I know of right now.
There's not.
And
golf's a good example. You can have passion for it. Doesn't mean you have to play professionally. Doesn't mean you have to be in the golf business. Yeah. I have tons of friends who never did either of those things. And golf is a huge part of their lives. And they have a passion for it. It's just not the way they earn a living.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough, as a separate topic, but I don't think enough young people are getting that advice on how to handle that as they come out of college golf or look towards the next thing.
Yeah. It is. I look back on my golf career, and for those of you watching at home, you probably didn't know me from golf because my career ended after college, which was a very, I don't want to say successful, because one, that sounds like I'm tooting my horn, and two, for the level that I was trying to play at, it wasn't that successful. However, I look back on my relationship with golf and how I did it, And I wish that I would have accepted or maybe at least considered the benefits off the course, off the trying to win tournaments, everything that went along with playing in a tournament and the whatever character develops from athletic competitions. It can be equally significant in your life. Here we are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, would we be here if we didn't play golf together? Right.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe. But
I think that applies though,
Yeah.
even if it is your job or if it is,
yeah,
I think whatever your job is, if you can frame it as here are the results that I'm obviously trying to put the effort into and deliver, but through these challenges, I'm also going to get a lot of benefits that are not going to show up on the balance sheet or on my score. But when your head's in the sand and you're grinding on that, it's hard to see that.
yeah, right.
Like winning and losing in business or law or golf teaches you how to handle things that you can use outside of your profession.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I remember watching, of course, I watched the 97 PGA last round replay ad nauseum because Davis won and he's a great friend to my family. But I remember Ben Crenshaw saying, you have to keep your mind on trying to win when you come down the stretch in a tournament. Can't be, I don't think he said this, but you can't be dusting off the mantle thinking, am I going to win? It's, I'm going to try to win.
Yeah.
And that actually applied to some other competition I was in May, in that I just wanted to win one match. And I had my first match, I lost. But then the second one, I thought, well, I'm not going to make this about winning. I'm going to focus on doing what I think I need to do to win. And the funny thing is, the hardest thing about that is you don't win. You're not guaranteed to win if you think about that, but you're guaranteed to lose if it's almost easier to guarantee a loss than it is to win. And that's why it's so hard to think about, to me, to keep your mind on trying to win, because it doesn't guarantee success. But if you don't do that, you're way more likely to increase your odds at losing.
Yeah. So
that, I'm just mirroring that story. That was my big takeaway from golf that carried over for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that make sense?
Yeah. So what role does it play in your life now, since we're loosely talking about golf?
About life. And that's a good question. I mean, because I've tried a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I think if, let's say, some of these public speaking methods, modalities, types of things that I've been working on don't pan out to make me an influencer. And that's not what I'm aiming at. In fact, I'm aiming in another direction.
Yeah.
Because there's so much empty rhetoric out there.
Yeah.
That's like, try to shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll hit the stars. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
Right.
However, by giving these things a shot, they probably are useful in another arena. And if you can walk away there, then that's a win.
Yeah.
So I think it's putting forth the effort. If you have an idea that something might be something you want to go for, but also looking for the benefit for it outside of what you're aiming for.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me
Secret.
think back to the thing I said about taking more time to think about what you're going to work on.
Yeah.
If I was going to say to err on one side or the other, I would say just to do stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Despite that, it really is. If you do anything, you don't know where it leads. You don't know what's going to come of it. But I mean, that's been good advice that some people have given me around business is, I have a friend who has a really successful financial data business. And he said, this came out of another business we tried to start that failed. And when that business, we were like, wow, that is not a market for that. That is not going to work. But I just figured out what might work. And that's a perfect example. Like what you're trying to do here might not work, but it might lead you to something that will work, or that you find fulfillment in or success in.
Yeah. And the example actually I just thought of was when I sent you the intro video for this channel. And I thought, well, maybe the content isn't as advanced as it will be or it could be.
Yeah.
But I took a different picture of my profile and I was like, I could use that instead of the old one I have for my LinkedIn and that just looks way more professional.
Yeah.
So that was a takeaway from trying that video. The video may not pan out, but at least I look little less casual in my professional profile shots.
More back to your kind of mid-20s perfect 10 days.
Exactly. Not exactly, people. My peak is yet to be had. Best days are ahead of me.
Like a fine wine.
Well, great. Well, man, thanks for getting in the weeds here with me.
Yeah, this is fun.
I'm glad neither of us cried today. I don't think this podcast is ready for that.
I saw a tweet that said, if you want to see two grown men cry, put a microphone between them and call it a podcast. I haven't heard that many people cry on podcasts.
I haven't either. In fact, I think that needs to be done more.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Joe Rogan cried when he was talking about Anthony Bourdain, which with that episode, now I'm stuttering.
That is sad.
That is worth crying over,
Yeah.
but we're not going to do that today.
No.
But all right, so encapsulating all this onto a bumper sticker or a sign, what would it say?
Good question. I would say just keep going.
Keep going.
Yep.
All right.
That's Phil. It's in Phil Knight's book, and probably 1,000 other books, but I thought it was cool. He closed his book by saying, I don't really have any advice, or I don't really have anything to share about what I've done, or what I don't think it was that special. My only advice is to just keep going.
Yeah.
And I think that is pretty much the best advice.
That is, yeah. That's the universal one. Earlier you said a lot of advice is specific to that person and what worked for them, but that's one that's universal.
That is universal to everything.
Yeah.
Family, professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of golf rounds that my mindset was average, perhaps. I got through maybe 6 holes and said, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to change it and do something else. And then it got worse, and it was like at the end of 18 holes, I looked back and thought, had I just kept going with that mindset, I wouldn't be 8 over. I might just be 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So that's applicable in golf and certain jobs I've had too, probably. I think I'm on number 15 right now. If this becomes a job, it'll be number 16.
Right here.
Okay. And then do you have there's a younger you watching, or somebody that you feel like you could have some compassion for or responsibility for? What would you tell them? And you've kind of already said it, but let's do it more ceremoniously.
Say that again.
So there's someone that's watching, perhaps it's your 24-year-old self, which you've kind of already described how you'd advise them, or there's someone out there now that's 24, maybe going through something similar. You said keep going then, but how would you direct the way you said it to them?
I would probably say that if your personality, you have to know your personality. Are you going to try too hard, or are you going to try too little? Are you going to become overly invested in something or under-invest in it?
Yeah.
I would tell my younger self, or someone that kind of fits my profile, to not try so hard, to back off, to not be so singularly focused. I'm always going to err on trying too hard versus letting things happen a little bit. Our mutual friend Thomas, we haven't talked about this in a long time, but this happened in this kind of time that we talked about earlier, when I was kind of banging my head against the wall in the mini tours. Sometimes you just have to float down the river of life and just see where it takes you. If you're that certain personality, thinking about that is helpful. Like for me, that's helpful. If you're a person who, maybe plays too many video games or just isn't as driven, you might need different. But if you're on the one side of the aisle, that's what I would go back and say. Kind of pick your head out of the sand a little bit more often.
Yeah. Sounds like you're not exactly saying stop trying. You're saying don't try so hard.
Don't try so hard.
And there's a
look around a little bit more. It's easy to get in your own head and ignore important people or important things or important moments.
Yeah.
Because you're so focused on one thing. And you miss out on those things and you don't perform as well.
Yeah.
It's a double killer.
Yeah. It's like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I bet there were times in your life where your social life was going well, your social life kind of crosses over with your friends, your family, and your golf was all going well.
Oh yeah.
It's
been good.
I know the camera's on, so it's kind of weird, but it's been really nice to talk.
Started with an empty coffee.
When we hang out, as we have been so much lately, we should do this more often.
Just put it on camera.
Talk about stuff.
That's a good way to kill the
thanks a lot.
Kill the viewers. These guys again? Are you kidding me?
And that is the hard part with Roberto Castro. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.